everybody. Welcome to the DM's Lost Whiskey. I'm Lost.
I'm Whiskey.
That's not right.
It's not accurate.
Even though according to our title, I am Lost. I'm just a different type of Lost.
Not all who wander.
I'm League of Whiskey. She's Lost.
Yeah.
So today we wanted to dive in and talk about our first time being dungeon masters and kind of the things that we wish that we knew and some things that we wanted to share with you guys about just basic things that we feel like dungeon masters need to know going into their first session or going into sessions after that. So Lost, why don't you go ahead and start us off?
Sure. So my first DM session was a one-shot that turned into a campaign, because that's always the best way to do things. But I had been a player for about 6-9 months before I had started DMing, and it was very surprising to me. I thought I had to... I thought I had a grasp of knowing everything. Like, I thought I had to know everything. So, walking into it, I thought I was fully prepared for the onslaught of what was to come.
I think we both know that you're never fully prepared.
Nope. My first session, I had one of my players pay off NPC to seduce another player's character. And they wanted that whole thing to go down, and I was like, shit, okay. And then they started engaging in this battle, and the battle was on difficult terrain, and then they started casting different spells that also made more difficult terrain. So I really wish, like, I had no idea how movement worked when you were stacking, you know? So they were like, well, what do you do? And I was like, I have no idea.
It's now super difficult terrain.
You can't move. You're in the middle of this field that has rocks in it, and you can't move.
The field has become a gelatinous ooze.
Yes.
You are now all stuck, and now must fight your way out.
Yes. But it was really, really interesting because I realized after the fact that I'd actually done the movement incorrectly, and they should have had more movement than what they were given. And so that was really a difficult thing, because like I had kind of like, I wanted to make my claim as a DM, like, I am the DM, like,
hear me roar,
right? Like, but realizing I'd made a mistake. Actually, I made several mistakes that session, which, like, I had the wrong voices for the wrong characters. I, like, got names confused, which was really funny. I was so nervous. Like, I was so freaking nervous.
I've found that there's always at least, like, a few characters that it doesn't matter if their names are close or not. You will always get them mixed up. So in my Wednesday campaign that I run, there are two characters, Mo and Nail. Two very different names. I can never get them right. I always mix them up.
To me, that sounds identical.
I don't know. Mo and Nail. It's
Nail. I thought you said mail, like
no.
M-A-I-L. Okay.
Nail, like you hammer into a board. And so I don't know what it is. And they're like, one's a ranger, the other one's a monk, one's a warforged, the other one's a changeling. Like, they're very different characters. I just, like, I cannot keep them straight in my head.
Yeah. Well, my first mistake was I had to make up an NPC on the fly during my first session, because they were like, we want to go talk to this fisherman that we see. Because I was like, because they were like, describe what's around us. So I was describing what was around them, and they were in a village by a river, and there was a fisherman at the river. They were like, we're going to go talk to that fisherman. I'm like, great. So
do your players do the thing where every NPC needs a name?
Yeah.
Okay. Just making sure
almost. Yeah,
sometimes
it depends on the session, you know? Like, yeah. But They were like, "Who's this person?" He actually doesn't have a name. He's just known as the Fishmonger. He was their
Okay.
favorite character. I did
My
all this prep work on all these other characters. He was their favorite character.
That's
I did a
always how
really
it
crazy
goes.
voice for him though. Yeah, like he was really like. So at the time, I had not listened to the episodes of Critical Role where they had the gun merchant.
Oh
What's
yeah,
his
the
name?
gunpowder guy.
Yeah, the gunpowder guy.
He kind of talks a
Apparently,
little bit like this.
yeah. Apparently, it sounded really similar. So they were like,
uh,
"Oh my gosh!" And so I didn't know that. And so next session, I couldn't remember what voice I did for him, and they were so disappointed because they wanted to keep talking to him, and I was just like, um, okay. So yeah, my first session was really interesting. I had to learn that it's okay if players squirrel, like that's normal and that's fine. Like so they had a fight. I had one player convince an NPC to seduce another player's character. I had another player have a tea party with a tree. Um, and I had to create these crazy characters in the fly. Yeah, it was all like it
this,
was crazy. It was really funny though.
your first DMing session was definitely crazier than mine. For mine, so the first time I really seriously DM'd was I was running a superhero campaign based off of the book series Superpowers. If you guys haven't read it, I really encourage it. It's so good. If you guys have ever seen the movie Sky High or My Hero Academia, it's kind of that, but they're going through college. It's got kind of a Harry Potter feel to it, where there's it. Each book is a school year, but it's really good. And so I base it off of that and kind of the program that they're going through. I loved the idea that the players didn't know what their powers were to start off with.
Oh,
Um,
interesting.
I got that idea while reading the book NPCs. Um, I think by Drew Hayes. I think it's by the same guy who wrote Superpowers. Um, but the whole premise of this is of the campaign was that the players came in having no earthly idea what their powers were, other than what they think their powers are going into the campaign. So I had one player who could literally um, create things or turn things into other things. So he could change the molecular compounds within something. So change water into whiskey.
So like
Uh,
alchemy almost, where it's
yeah,
like
it's alchemy by
equivalent
touch.
exchange. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Um,
That's cool.
well, he had killed his father on accident by turning him into air, turning him into pure oxygen.
I'm sorry.
Um,
What?
yeah, he had the
Oh,
ability. So, I mean, it makes sense. Like you take your
yeah.
cup and you turn your cup into pure oxygen. Uh, and so he thought that he had the ability to make things disappear. So he's thinking like he's got another plane of existence or something that he's going off of. Meanwhile, he's just turning things into oxygen because that's
No,
all he
that's
knows how to
so
do.
bad.
And eventually, he learned that like he could create things virtually out of thin air because he'd take the oxygen in the air and turn it into a knife or a dagger. Meanwhile, I have another character who believes that he can create things out of thin air, but he creates illusions so real that it can actually do damage. So it would actually the
Like
illusion
like
would
a psychic damage, or would it?
yeah, so it would basically trigger the pain receptors in someone's brain so that
Oh,
you could actually kill someone by throwing an illusion at them. Um,
that's crazy.
so like they're all coming into it with these like, oh, we don't know what's happening. Well, here's the thing that I learned about this is that if the players don't know what's happening, it's my job to eventually tell them. But I have to do it in a way that is fun. So like the one of the rules in the campaign or in the hero certification program, which is the program for them to become superheroes, is that you can't kill people. And so like you can't kill the other students in the program. So
It's typically frowned upon.
yeah,
Don't
strangely.
make them disappear. Like just.
So that character was having a really hard time because he's like, I only do one thing. Granted, there's a lot more depth to it, in how I got them engaged and stuff like that. But uh, I'm coming in. I'm more or less having to. I took the Palladium system and I had to basically rewrite it. I had to come up with rules for alcohol and becoming intoxicated, because they're in college. Like,
That's
I
funny.
yeah, it was a very very interesting campaign, but I learned really early on that I wasn't doing a very good job at DMing it because we would have whole sessions that would go by where it's just like training montage for an entire 3 hour session.
So like what so when you say okay, let's talk about like good DM, bad DM for a
Yeah.
hot second.
Okay.
Because you mentioned you've said this a couple times too that like when you started watching Critical Role and you started seeing how Matt Mercer did his thing, that there were many areas you could improve upon.
Yeah.
Um, so let's talk about that. Let's break that down a little
Yeah.
bit. What does
So
that mean to you? A
so I
little
think
bit.
I think the big thing that I was struggling with and why I say that I wasn't a good DM, is because I was more worried about the story and the story that I had in my head than the players' involvement and the players having fun. So I was sticking like, no, like this is the story that's happening, um, and my players, like I said, would go through entire just training montage sessions, where it's like, yeah, we're experimenting with our powers, like for just an entire session, and I'm like, well, I can't give you too much because like it's only been a week, and I'm not gonna like give you these big extravagant things. And then like that turned into, okay, we're having an entire month pass at a time, and really the only thing that's happening is training montage and tests. Um, but after I started watching Critical Role, I was like, okay, I need to. One of the things that I love that Matt Mercer does, is in the majority of sessions there is some kind of combat. Um,
Mm.
Granted, he's got 4 hours a session at least, 3 to 4 hours a session. Um, so that leaves enough time for combat, for uh, player interaction. Um, if you're running on 2.5 hours, you start to struggle in that. Um, so finding ways of having like, or he puts in like little games within the game, like the casino. He had like all the
Yeah.
different casino games going on. Um, so we kind of had to come up with, like, I had to start coming up with ways to engage my players outside of, oh, training montage, oh, tests and exams and that stuff, oh, your dating life. Like, I started coming up with that stuff, and my players literally told me the last 3 sessions before we stopped playing, aka after I kind of started doing that stuff, were the best 3 sessions that they had had. Um, so yeah, that's what I mean whenever I say that I wasn't a great DM. Is that I was more focused on the story that I had in my head than making sure that the players were having fun, and making sure the characters were engrossed in the world. So
Yeah, I know I myself have struggled with that even as a DM. How can I better involve my players in the world? How can I better have them more immersed? And I find it to be a very difficult kind of aspect, especially for those who can struggle with role playing.
hmm
Like I know one of my players is much more combat involved,
yeah,
and having him talk to other people in a role playing kind of situation is just really challenging for him. Um, so, yeah, no, I can understand where you're coming from with that for sure.
and I think that that's actually a great thing for us to hit on really quick. Things that we don't know or we don't think about going into our first DMing session. There are different types of players, and
Word.
and some players are going to sit down, they're going to have their voice, they're going to have their 10-page backstory that you didn't read, you just kind of skimmed. Um, they're going to sit down, they've got their nice dice, they are ready to just dive in. And then you've got the person who, they could even be veteran D&D players, but to them, their favorite part is combat. Like,
Hmm?
not even the flavor that happens in combat, just combat. They don't have a voice prepared. They don't have you know they're probably stealing dice off of other people for the session. Um, you, you,
True DM veterans.
uh, then and you have everybody in between there, right? And it's making sure that your campaign is good for both groups, like making sure that you're getting enough combat in, but also you're getting enough intrigue in that it engages those players. Um,
Or puzzles. Like I have a player who like they're not huge into combat, but
mhm.
they love dungeon crawls because they're all puzzle related. And so yeah, trying to strike that balance can sometimes be a bit of a challenge between like conversation, combat, and
Oh yeah, and
puzzle type
and
games
other
too.
types things, or the three types of encounters, I think, is the way that I'd put it. Combat encounters, social encounters, and intellectual encounters.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, as also one thing that I learned from DMing my big Sunday homebrew campaign that I actually learned to fix and adjust, and I love the way that Matt Mercer does it because I started doing it his way, and I'm like, this is so much better. Dungeon crawls. Okay, if in D&D, if you go and you take any module and you look at a dungeon in any module, it's this huge big map, right? And they got to make
Hmm.
their way through the tunnels and all of that. Uh,
Right.
well, Matt Mercer never uses any of those. His style of dungeon crawl is he has several rooms that kind of connect, and the players can like go off different directions and go into those different rooms. Um,
Okay.
but it gets rid of the monotony of I move 30 feet, I move 30 feet, I move 30 feet, like or even the I'm investigating while I'm walking, or that
Yeah.
kind of stuff, because
I
that
know.
that really slows it down.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think I have I probably have a very unique experience of D&D then. Part of it because I started or I became interested while watching Critical Role, but the other
Hmm.
part of it is um, when as a player, I would go into a dungeon crawl. It wasn't the movement of 30 feet. It wasn't. We didn't have that as much, and we actually talked a lot about like what passive perception is versus active perception
Yep.
because some DMs use passive perception and some DMs don't. They just say roll perception, and you're like, why? Like, why do I need to roll
Yeah,
perception?
I
Or,
do. I do kind of a middle ground when it comes to passive perception. Sometimes I'll just give it to them based off their passive perception, but sometimes I look at the player. Like if I don't think that their passive perception is necessarily high enough, I'll pick my
mhm.
characters who have the highest passive perception, and I'll have them roll me perception checks.
Okay.
That way,
Interesting.
they can still there's still the possibility of them getting the information,
Right.
um, but they it's not just like a given if it's something that I think is too
Hmm.
difficult.
So yeah, and I know one thing that I am trying to figure out, and something that I realized even from my first session to one of my last sessions, we actually sat down at the end of my last session and calculated the official amount of time the group has spent together,
Hmm.
and it's like 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And like you stop and you think about that, like part of me as a DM was getting frustrated that oh these players they're like the characters aren't communicating and I don't know what this means and blah blah blah, and then you stop and you're like oh it's 2 weeks, like they don't know each other at all. Like, if you know someone for 2 weeks, you're not
It's
sharing your life story
yeah,
with them. Like,
yeah.
that's not how that works.
Even
Um,
even if you guys have been at death's door together over the course of that 2 weeks, like yeah, you might be more inclined to share, but there's still things that you're not going to just be open about. And part of that, I will say, like have so you you know a lot about Per.
I do.
So for those of you guys that don't know, Per is a character that I've created. I'm running him in a session. He's a charisma rogue, so he's a bard rogue, swashbuckler, College of Whispers, and he just has been keeping secrets and manipulating the party for. I mean, we've been playing for almost a year now. I think about 9 months, and he's been doing his thing. Like he's got his goals, and he's kind of warping the party to go down those paths. Um,
Without the party knowing it,
yeah,
mind
without
you.
the party knowing it.
Like,
So
not even the people. Like, the people don't even know. Like, I want to make this clear for everyone. Like, not even the people who play the
as
characters know what's going on.
well, they
I'm just
didn't.
saying.
They didn't know what was going on.
Now they do.
I have now shared Per's backstory and all of that, and we calculated how long it had been. It'd only been like a month total that the party had been together. And like me as a player, I'm going. I need to share this information, like because now the entire party is kind of looking at me sideways. Like they now know that really sketchy stuff is happening. Um, And so I, as a player, I'm like, well, I just need to share the information, even though Per, who's very closed off to sharing things with anybody, he probably wouldn't share that stuff. Um, so as a player, I had to make that leap and just say, no, like they're gonna. I even told other people, like, you have to ask though. Like that was my stipulation, was
Yeah.
I'm happy to share, but you guys have to ask. Um, so if you're a player out there right now and you're like, well, I've got this really secretive character, sometimes you have to do that. Like sometimes you have to
Yeah.
break your character's mold so that the party can function. And there's going to be entire episodes on that, I'm pretty sure, because that's I know a big issue that a lot of people come across.
Yeah, I know. I've worked with some DMs and I've worked with some players about it, and it can be a bit of a struggle. Definitely talk to your DM is like the one
Mm-hmm.
thing I'll say for now, and just say like, this is what my plan is for the character, because the DM's gonna know the all
Everybody's
other
stuff.
people,
Yeah.
everybody's stuff in the party, so they'll be able to be like, okay, you might want to share this with the group, or okay, like we'll play it out and see what happens. Like they're gonna have a better understanding of how that works. But if you don't do that, it can
Yeah.
go downhill very, very quickly.
One of the things I want to bring us back to our topic for this episode,
Sure.
and that was a great place to do it. Another thing is that you as a DM know everything that's happening with everybody else. At least you should. There's a list of things that you should know as a DM, and you should know everybody's backstories. Sometimes you might forget people's backstories if it's just like if you're running a module and it's not something that's been like really heavy into it, and that's fine. But when it comes up, you should probably know it. Uh,
This is true.
Speaking of which, I know Lost, you wanted to kind of talk a little bit about. Um, Actually, hold on, let me finish that last thought. I just realized where I was going with it. Um, so if you hit points in your story where you feel like people are starting to get frustrated, it is okay to throw in that random NPC or create a random NPC that knows that one character's backstory, or to do something or have somebody say something that makes the party go, wait, what?
Mm-hmm.
And have everybody kind of turn and go, you need to spill. Like, what's going on? Um, so I know, Lassie, you had wanted to talk a little bit about where you should start as a DM, whether it's modules, complete and utter homebrew, or the middle ground.
Right. I mean, so okay, so this whole conversation started a couple weeks ago,
Mm-hmm.
before we had even started recording or anything for this podcast. Um, I was on a forum for DMs, as we all can tend to
It's a
do.
great
Um,
resource.
it is a wonderful resource. It can also be like YouTube comments,
Yeah.
and that sometimes people are not as gentle. Um, but there were two people who were vehemently against new DMs doing anything that is homebrew or a blend. Basically, they were like, you have to start as a one shot that is a like canned adventure,
Hmm.
that is a module, and that is how you will start, and that is the best way to start. And they were listing all these reasons why, and I have really mixed feelings about that.
Yeah.
Um, because on one hand, I can understand the benefit of doing that for people who are unfamiliar to the game. I personally would recommend people being a player first, just so that they can get
Yep.
an idea of how the game actually runs.
Yep.
Even if it's just like for a couple weeks, just get a feel for how that game works. And that's not even just like D&D 5e. You could do that for Pathfinder. You can do that for Warhammer. You could do
Hmm.
like there's so many different RPG games where that is so important to do first. It also helps you be a better DM.
Yeah,
Um,
because seeing the things that you like and don't like about the DM that you're running with,
mhm.
um, even going and checking out things like Critical Role really help. Because uh, I know that whenever I made the transition to 5e, I didn't really know the rules at all, other than what I had watched in Critical Role.
Mhm.
So whenever I made that kind of transition, I was like, I kind of just used the knowledge that I had there to make that transition. So watching,
Yeah.
if maybe your play group is like, hey, we really want to play, but you're the only person that's going to DM, and that may happen. If that's the case, I
Mhm.
recommend going and checking out any of the podcasts, live streams, anything like that of people playing whatever system it is you're using
Yeah.
to learn
And
those rules.
to D&D 5e's credit, like there's not just Critical Role. I know we bring it up a
Yeah,
lot because it has affected both of us in a profound way.
yeah.
But there are other podcasts out there that are D&D related,
And
like
I have a
Dungeons and Daddies is a
Dungeons of
really good
Daddies,
one.
Dungeons of Drakkenheim.
Mhm.
Those are two that are on my list. Soon I have to finish campaign one of Critical Role, and then I'm gonna go pick those up. Um, if that ever happens, fingers crossed. uh,
It's an emotional toll.
oh, I know.
We'll get through it. It's fine.
But definitely go check out those other ones because like while Critical Role is the biggest, and that's really probably because they're voice actors who are doing it. Um, it may not be for you. Go check out some of the other podcasts, the other live streams. I know that there's a whole bunch of YouTube videos of gameplay, um, so
Well,
go check those out.
and not only that, one of the things I find really cool about looking at D&D played by different groups of people is you get a feel for how different groups work.
Hmm.
So for example, even in our first experiences DMing, my party was like a herd of cats
Yeah,
that were just kind of like going about and doing their own thing. Never mind the fact there was a necromancer that was using this village as a method to concoct and sell and distribute different kinds of poisons. But you have those kinds of people who are just kind of like, I just want to go do this because this is fun and why not? I'm going to go have tea with this tree because it sounds like a pretty cool tree. And that's totally awesome and that's
yeah.
totally fine. You're also going to have those people who are like going to be deeply involved in their
Hmm.
characters and just like hardcore like role playing. Like once you enter the room, you're going to be like you're in your character.
That was a lot more of my first group was very like we are in our characters like
Mm-hmm.
so yeah I think
But having the different strokes, I think, is,
yeah
is important
yeah
because it's good to have different kinds of gameplay in that. It's one of the beautiful things about D&D that I love.
yeah and I think so one of the things that I as a DM I know that whenever you and I first talked about this came up but I as a
Mhm.
DM will always recommend modules first. I don't think that it's the end all be all. um, One of the things that I do as a DM is I ask all of my players to run a one shot. They can homebrew it if they want, but I ask that they all run a one shot. That way they can kind of see what's on the other side of the screen. Um, but if your first campaign, um, I know that whenever I picked up a module for the first time, I had already been homebrewing, like I'd already run the homebrew stuff. But when I picked up a module for the first time, I was like, there's so much more than I ever knew I needed. Um, and
Okay, that's fair.
it gave me a better idea of what I needed to prep. Having read through and played through the module. So my Sunday campaign, which is my big homebrew main center of my world campaign, started as Dragon Heist, Waterdeep Dragon Heist. Um, Now they didn't make it. I think they made it about halfway through Dragon Heist before they were like, "Time to go do our own thing." I was like, "Cool," but they having run that module, it gave me a good idea of okay, what does the next steps need to look like. Um,
Mm.
so I encourage people to at least check out a module. Go run a module on the side. There's some really great starting modules. Um, Dragon of Icefire Peak is one that I've run. I ran that with my wife, just the two of us. It was a ton of fun. It was our date nights for a while. Uh,
That's actually really cute, but
yeah,
that's
but it's a small 5 level campaign. You go out, you do the things at the end. You fight the dragon, and huzzah! Like,
I mean,
eh,
and it's not to say that like modules are bad, right?
no,
Like
no, no,
I
no.
don't think modules are like horrible things. I especially for people who run multiple campaigns, it's
Hmm.
extremely useful because all that prep work that you need to do for like any homebrew campaign, you don't have to worry about it because it's there. And you
Yeah.
can just kind of reference it and be like, "Oh yeah, this is the thing." Um by the same token, uh for people who have very vivid and vibrant imaginations and already have an understanding for how the game works,
Hmm.
I I find I can find modules a little confining,
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
in a certain respect, because it leaves amount it has a certain amount of creative freedom, and then
Hmm.
that's it. Like there's a bar that it goes to, and then
Yeah.
and it's that's something that I don't know. Yeah, I'm not sure. I think a lot of it too has to do with how I'm trying to figure out how to phrase this without sounding like a jerk. I don't know why, but like I don't know. I feel like I'm offending people by saying like
No, no,
that
no.
it
I think what you're trying to say is that if you feel like you're equipped to run something that you can homebrew, or if you even just want to run a complete homebrew world, don't go do it. Like if that's something that you're inclined to do, go do it. Forget what anybody else says. Um, you can, if you want to go create your own system, go do it. Like don't let what anybody else is saying stop you. Like I like running modules first. Well, I'm also running 3 campaigns right now, so I'm running 2 modules and a homebrew. Um, Sorry, I'm running. Yeah, I guess I am running 3 campaigns right now, and then I'm in a fourth. I play a lot of D&D. I don't think anybody ever questioned that. Uh,
fine.
but if like I know one of my best friends, he loves world building. And one time he literally just sat us all down and said, "Hey guys, I want to run a one shot in my world that's going to determine history. Like I've got my system. Like it's just a one shot that'll just determine the course of history in my world." And I was like,
Wow,
"That's super cool. Like
that
let's
is
do it."
super cool.
Um, I, I don't know if that was his first time DMing or not, but he does world building for fun.
I would be curious to know actually. I have something in my eye, but I would be curious to know if that was his first time, and then what his thoughts were on that.
Yeah, I know that he ran another campaign like he ran a campaign for us after that. Um, but yeah, no,
Yeah.
I was definitely I would definitely say I would encourage you to check out modules. If nothing else, go read through a module.
Yeah.
Uh, if you read through a module, so I think that there's a huge wide spectrum of the way the DMs run campaigns. You have DMs who literally they want to sit down with a module, run it as it is, and they're perfect. Um,
Hmm.
and keep in mind, this is also I say DMs, but they're also this is also a skill for parties and what parties are looking for in their campaigns. So people who just want to run a module, they're and that's awesome. Like great,
Hmm.
great on you. Run the module, play D&D. Then you have people like Lost who homebrew in complete like their whole complete world and homebrew the entire campaign in that world,
Hmm.
which is, I mean, hats off to you.
It's not necessarily easy, but it's
No,
fun.
yeah,
Like, and actually, you remind me of one thing that I do find very important, whether you run a module or not.
mm-hmm.
And this is something that I wish I had known going into my first sessions as a DM. Um, Having that baseline for people, like setting expectations for people so
Yep,
that when they go into the module or they go into whatever campaign it is or one shot it is, they know, okay, this is not going to be a murder hobo spree,
mm-hmm.
or there are certain lines that we're going to go to and we're not going to go past that line, or I'm going to expect you here every week, like
Yeah,
different expectations. I didn't do that for my first couple sessions,
yeah,
so it became really strange, and we did have to sit down, and we've had to have multiple conversations, which are they were fine, like they weren't bad, but I think if I had established certain things from the get go, it would have been a lot easier for the group as a whole
mm-hmm.
so that they know what to expect.
And
You
I
know what
think,
I mean?
yeah, and I think that it's important not only at the get go, but if you bring in any new players. So
Mm-hmm.
um, I'm just gonna say them as they are. They're the Waste Owners. That's my Sunday campaign. I'm gonna reference them as the Waste Owners. Um, so the Waste Owners started off as 2 people, and
There's
now they're
not like
6.
there's not like a hidden joke in there, is there?
No.
Okay.
The Waystone Inn is from Name of the Wind. That's where they chose the
Mm,
name from.
okay.
Uh,
I went my mind went a totally different direction, but that's fine.
um,
Sorry.
no, it's okay. Uh, so they when I sat down, so they were added 2 at a time. So when I sat down with the last 2, I had already started. Like they were already part of the way through the first story arc of the homebrew, and I sat down with them and I said, "Look, I just need to make sure that you are well aware I am homebrewing this, which means that I need you guys to take this campaign seriously. Like I need you to be there most Sundays. If at any point you can't, cool, awesome. We can have your character take a break, anything like that. But I need that communicated to me because if I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
put in the effort, I need to make sure that it's respected. Uh,
Word.
and if your party like if your party knows that they're not going to always be able to be around, you can still go run a homebrew if you want to run the homebrew for that. But personally, I would rather run a module because I will at least know that I'm not have like the homebrew that I'm creating isn't fading. Uh,
Yeah. Like the certain amount of respect that comes with running a homebrew. There's so many things you need to think of that a
yeah.
lot of players don't assume or
Hmm.
they don't realize, like they don't think about those things, but
Yeah.
there's just a lot of nuances in that. And if you're not going to have players that are going to appreciate that, then I think running a module is a fair thing to do.
Yeah.
Like,
And
you know.
going back to my scale because I think that this is a really important thing, kind of learning where you fall on this. Um, I say that my campaign is a homebrew because my campaign is a homebrew, even though I run it all in Faerun. Um, so
Mm-hmm.
I run it all in the main 5e world. It's just what's happening in the world, and even I use it more as a baseline that I go through and I tweak
Mm-hmm.
to fit the story that I'm trying to write or the story that I'm trying to have my characters play, of what's happening in the settings and like my idea of what the settings are. And then like my brother who's running my campaign that I'm playing per in, um, he took the Curse of Strahd and he like rewrote it. So
Yes, he did.
he is running a module, but it is no longer the module that
It
you.
is so cool.
Yeah, he's done an amazing job with it,
We
and
should
he's
we should
taken.
have him guest. Sorry. Okay.
Yeah, we can have him guest star one time. I'd love that. I'm sure he would too. Um, but he's created his homebrew around our backstories, where our backstories are intricately intertwined with the story of Curse of Strahd, which like I can't imagine taking a module and doing that to it, but I also can't imagine being on the other side of completely homebrewing a world. I started trying to homebrew a world. It's a lot of effort, and I don't really, yeah, I don't really love it.
Writing a writing a pantheon. Yeah, you have to figure out the pantheon of the gods. You're like, huh? How did this world
No,
begin?
that I enjoyed. That I enjoyed. It's the actual like what plants are there on this world that make me go, oh, this is so annoying. Um, it's all the little like nitpicky stuff. I loved creating the pantheon and kind of the creation story, but oh man, it drove me nuts when we got into like the well, what animals are on this world? The flora, the fauna, the like yeah, it
See,
was
to me, that seems easy. Like that part of it seems easy. The other part where you look at like, okay, you have this world. What dimensions are involved? How
mhm.
many dimensions are you going to have? Like, are you going to have the elemental planes? Okay, well, I
Do
have
you have
a
an avatar?
NPC. Do you have an avatar? And everything changed when the Fire Nation attacked. No,
When the
um,
fire plane attacked.
but
And campaign idea for someone out there. Congratulations.
you could almost make a TV show about it.
You
Like,
almost
let's not
could.
get too carried away, though.
Okay,
Let's
hold
not
on.
get too carried away.
Side note, there's a Patreon out there right now for an Avatar The Last Airbender RPG. Tabletop
What?
RPG. Yeah. Uh,
Oh, I'm totally
it's
supporting
in the
that.
bar. It's in the bar. Bobby posted it somewhere.
Okay,
Um, sorry, that was a whole. I
that's
digress.
cool. No,
Uh,
that's no, but it's tabletop RPG. You know, D and
yeah,
D podcast. Like,
yeah,
it
that
all
makes
kind of
sense.
works.
Go check it out. Go support it. I, I'm excited to get to play it personally.
I think it'll be. I
It'll
think
be
it'll
fun.
be cool.
Um,
But
so
yeah, trying to figure out how many planes there are is another thing too.
yeah.
It's just another level. Pun
Uh,
intended.
so I think when it comes to this, finding out where you stand as a DM, um, and a big part of that is what sounds like fun to you. Um, Dungeons and Dragons is supposed to be fun for everyone, the dungeon master included.
Mm-hmm.
If you're not having fun as a dungeon master, stop. Because if this is what
Yes,
I've found is if you're not having fun as a dungeon master, your players probably aren't having fun either.
that is true.
Because you're the one telling the story, and if you're not having fun telling the story, then they're probably not having fun listening to it. Um, so keep that in mind as you go in. Kind of find your niche. Um, if you really don't have any idea what you're getting into, I encourage you to start with a module or go check out some of those D&D podcasts or just go if you go on to Roll20, you can join one shots and campaigns. Um, like, go play the game, learn the game before you
Mhm.
become a dungeon master. Um, know your players' names. Even if you get them mixed up, it's better getting them mixed up and it becoming an inside joke amongst the party than you going,
Are you who are
what was
you?
your name? Um,
Then you call them by the wrong name, and
and I
it's like
yeah, and I know in our next episode we're going to be talking about some tools, tips, and tricks that we have as DMs and what that we've gathered over our DM experience to help with this and with some other things as well.
Mm-hmm.
Um, no, if you're homebrewing, I know that I got myself caught on this the other day. Um, know the political climate.
Yeah.
Okay, just the general political climate. Even if you're running a module, like it'll say it in the module what the political climate is. It can be very important. My players, I'm running. My party has three dragonborns in it, and they walked into a city that hates dragonborns, and I forgot for an entire session. And I was like, guys, I'm so sorry. We're gonna like say you guys had disguise self and all this stuff going
Mhm.
on, and um,
Yeah.
but it felt really bad for me as a DM to have to go back. Granted, they curveballed it to me. They said they jumped to the other side of the world, and I was like, wait a second. Um, but have a general idea of the political climate. Luckily, I had that all in my notes. I just didn't check your notes. Check your notes. That's another thing. Double check your notes. Um,
Yes.
what are some
True
other
words.
what are some other basic things that you think that people need to know going into their first session uh, as dungeon masters?
Basic things to know. It's okay to not know everything. That is a really important thing to know. Um, there have been many times where I thought I was supposed to know all the answers, and if anything, it just gave me so much anxiety and stress. Um, and my players felt that.
Hmm.
So know that how how you present yourself, and if you don't know the answer right away, like that's okay. It's okay to say, give me a minute to look it up, or it's okay to say, here, I'm not sure how that would work in this world, let me check back with you
Yeah,
after this session, or something like that.
and
um
and along those lines, I think that it's important that you have a trust of your players at least until proven otherwise. And the reason why I say that is because there's no way that you're going to know every spell in the player's handbook, much less the 10 other books that have spells in them. So
this is true.
when your player casts a spell, if you don't know it, trust them. Um, I play virtually, so I can go and I can Google it really quick, but uh, there is a sense of trust that you have to have with your players whenever it comes to spell casting, whenever it comes to keeping track of their hit points, whenever the spell slots, all that stuff. If you're going in and you can't trust your players, your job's gonna be 1,000 times harder.
It's true. I normally, even in the midst of combat, I normally like to even tell my players, like, hey, you're up next. So
Mm-hmm.
whatever spell you're going to have or whatever action you're going to do, start preparing it now.
Yeah,
Because there's been more than one occasion where I've sat down when we're having this combat sequence happen and people don't know. And it
yeah,
makes it so much slower and so much more difficult for the other players because they're sitting there like twiddling their thumbs, looking at their phones or whatever. And then you feel bad because you're just like, oh, people aren't as invested. That's not the case.
yeah.
It's just that
Things are going slowly.
things are going slowly.
Yeah, and people's time is the most valuable thing that they can give, and
Mhm.
uh, but going back to the whole thing about knowing the political climate and my situation there, it is okay to tell your players that you were wrong. You will make mistakes. I
Okay.
I don't think I figured out how to do searching for traps and disarming traps and all that correctly for the first like solid year. And
So,
finally I sat down and I was like, this is how it happens.
so funny story to go with that. I was running a one shot and the players were fighting a Naga, and I misread the kind of damage that was supposed to be dealt. I think it was supposed to be like 4d8 damage or something like that,
Mhm.
but I like flipped it or something, like I did like 8d8 or like some crazy ass number, and I was just like, oh yeah, you on average take 48 damage, and they're like, what? I'm level like 6, like that's my entire hit points. Like, what are you doing? And
We
so
need to leave.
afterwards I was looking back through and I was reading the hit point things, and I was like, oh crap.
Whoops.
Oh no. So I had to go back to my party and I had to apologize. I was like, I am so sorry. Like, I totally misread the damage, and you guys get some of your health potions back because of it. Like, you know what I mean? Because like they're cramming health potions in their face because they're dying every turn.
Yeah, yeah. And there's really, I think, there's two ways of going about that fix.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's, hey,
Yep.
we need to go back and we need to retcon things, um,
Yep.
which reconstruct, like, go through, change what happened. Um, I know that that's never ideal, so sometimes
Mm-hmm.
it's just saying, yeah, guys, I messed up, but here's an explanation for why. Like I came up with this idea, like it was a super naga, and it was beating the snot out of you because it felt like it. Like I don't know. It coming. Sometimes it's like, oh man, like that in itself could become a joke within your playgroup. Like
True.
I hope this isn't a super orc. Like just adding super into front of things whenever it's a crazy strong version of it. Um, yeah,
True.
and I think the biggest thing that I've learned as a DM, um, because I overbuffed my party. I overbuffed the waste owners. They're now all very, very strong. Uh,
I did the same thing with my group. It's what it is. I think
and
that's
that's
not uncommon.
no, but it also that's not a bad thing. It's good for
Right.
your players to feel strong because it makes them like their characters more.
Mm-hmm.
Um, level one sucks, but
There's a reason why they make memes of
yeah,
level one players.
yeah. Um, but know that it is okay to adjust combat on the fly, whether it's adding in another wave. Um, I've literally doubled creatures' healths before because the party was just dealing with them so easily. There's so I was running a one shot. Okay, there were only three characters and they're fighting the big bad, and they are just tearing into him. I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna add 50 health. He's a big monster. 50 health isn't a big deal. Well, in the next like two turns, they decide not to attack. They're taking health potions. They're healing each other. Like all good. They're doing good things, but they're not doing damage. Meanwhile, the creature is doing damage, and he knocks two of them out. And over the course of this, I'm looking at the sheet, and I've straight up killed two of the characters. There's only one left, and this is after I've added those 50 hit points. And I look, and the creature has 51 hit points. And I was like, gonna go ahead and get rid of the 50 that I added. Like that's okay. Like if it's supposed like easy combats are important. Like you should have easy combats. My players will
Mm-hmm.
probably sit there and go, David, you never give us easy combats, and they're not wrong. But easy combats are a good thing. They also make your characters feel powerful. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but being able to you are able to make combats that are supposed to feel difficult however you need to do it.
Mm-hmm. Um, to that point, um, okay, actually, it has nothing to do with that point. But one of the things that it's like to that point, how can I segue this? I can't, so I'm just gonna say my thing. Um, uh, one of the things that I want to make very, very clear is um, DMs are not glorified novelists
Mhm.
or like wannabe novelists. It's collaborative storytelling. So as a DM, don't walk in to a campaign assuming that everything's going to go according to this magical plan that you have and you're going to force characters to do these certain actions
Yeah.
because there comes a point where there is character and player autonomy and they're going to do different things and
Yeah.
that's okay. So learning ahead of time that that's okay and preparing yourself, especially if you're like me and I can be kind of a little bit controlling, like learning to let that go. It takes a lot of pressure off of yourself and also takes a lot of pressure off of the players.
Yeah.
Because I guarantee if you're going to force all of your players down this path and they don't want to go down that path, they're not going to have a good time. And they're going to let you know that they're not having
Oh
a good
yeah.
time.
And I literally have a few points off of what you just said there.
Yeah. No, go.
Um,
Yeah.
the first of which is, you're right, we're not novelists. In fact, the DMs are not the storytellers. We are kind of the narrators of what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
everybody at the table is telling the story. It is as much the player's job to help tell the story as it is the DM's. Um, the DMs set up the world. They set up the story, but they aren't the ones telling it.
Mm-hmm.
And it is not our story as DMs. It is the player's story. They're the main characters. Let them be that.
Yep.
And as such, they are not your characters. Okay? This is something that, man, you don't get to decide what characters do, how they feel, how they should act, anything like that. If you and your player have different ideas of how their characters are running, you're wrong, they're right. Um,
That is a very controversial
it is.
claim.
Oh, it's definitely
But
controversial.
I
But
love it. But I love it.
don't get me wrong, there are lines on that. Like if your character
Right.
is a murder hobo in a campaign of lawful good paladins, something needs to change.
Yep.
And the I hate the line because my character would do it as a cop out for your character being an ass. Um, but when it comes to like the way that people decide to play their characters, unless they are toxic to the group, like it is up to them to choose what their character does, how their character responds to things. Um,
And I'm
yeah,
sure
go ahead.
that I'm sure we're definitely going to have a podcast about how to work with players
Hmm.
whose characters run very contradictory to other people in the group or even to yourself as a DM. Like you may have a vision for how your world is, but the way in which they exist in the world might be contrary to what is
Yeah,
typical for that world. And
yeah,
and we can talk about like different things we've tried or different situations we've been in. We only have our own experience to go off of and the experience that the interwebs gives us.
yeah.
And we also have your guys' experience. So if you guys
Please
have
share
that
it.
kind of
Yeah,
a situation, yeah, like definitely share it and definitely share questions because like that's how we learn.
yeah.
So um
So
that
my
go
final
ahead.
point off of this, of what you said is, um, you still need to give your party direction.
I was just gonna say that.
Oh,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Go
No,
ahead.
no, 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 it's true. It's true though. Like there are some parties that they can like they're experienced, they have very outgoing personalities and they just take charge and they go.
Hmm.
And that's awesome. And there are some players or groups that are very tentative because they don't know what they're getting into. They don't know if they're going to make a wrong move, like a wrong move, whatever that means. Um, and they sometimes need to be gently guided, and that's not a bad thing.
No, no, it's not. And I think, and whenever I say this, I'm not saying you need to railroad your characters. What I'm saying is your characters need to have an idea of what needs to be done and what they can do to do it, to fix it. So like they need to know what's wrong in the world or whatever the problem is that they're facing, and they need to have an idea of what they can do to fix it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, they, uh, you know, an example is my characters know that there's a whole bunch of things happening in the world. It's all focused around demons, but they also know that another that this vampire has taken over a city, and they need to go deal with that. They now know
Mhm.
that there's a whole nother thing happening on the other side of the world where they just got to. Like, they have options of things that they can be doing, um, but they don't feel like they have to go down a single path. But they also know that there are things that they can be doing, and that they can choose to do something different. But at least they
Mhm.
have some direction in where they feel like the story is bringing them. Uh,
Yeah,
so I believe that we are all out of time, Lost.
I think so.
Um, Everybody, in 2 weeks, Lost and I will be live again here on the League of Whiskey Twitch channel at 1 o'clock Central Time. Uh,
Hmm.
we will be talking about tips and tricks for DMs. And some of the things that we keep in our tool belt to kind of use on a quick moment. Um, I hope that you all are having a great day. Make sure that you leave comments either in the Twitch chat or in the YouTube comments, wherever it is that you are. If you are watching on Twitch and you missed some of this, and you'd like to come back and watch it later, the YouTube VOD will be up on the League of Whiskey YouTube channel tomorrow at 1 o'clock. Um, so, guys, thank you for joining us over here in the bar. Uh, I hope you guys have a great week, great 2 weeks, and we'll see you guys soon. Have a drink for me, y'all.
Have a good time, guys.
All right, peace.